So in the last video, we actually looked about lime mortar and what are its types and advantages and disadvantages, how it's painting, what is its composition, how it's built. Now this is mud mortar. The mud mortar is actually a kind of paste. The paste, I think, generally we take a little bit of mud and pour a little bit of water on that, and we start mixing it. It becomes a paste. Now, like how we did. Like how we do clay, little bit of water we add and the clay becomes a paste also. So the paste is prepared by mixing suitable clay soil with water. So particularly, see, when we want to put mortar needs to be a little bit more stronger, so we actually add a little bit of clay to that, so it becomes more stable. The second point is the soil which is used for preparing mud mortar should be free from grass, pebbles, etc. So basically, a soil which is collected, which is filtered, and which has no impurities is going to be used for the mud mortar mixing. Now these are the cheapest mortars but weakest in strength. So mud mortar is one of in previous times, mud mortar was very up, and even now mud mortar is being used. So mud mortar is very cheap, and it's the weakest in strength when compared to lime mortar. So these mortars are used for brickwork of ordinary buildings and for plastering walls in rural areas. So literally, the last point tells us that this is a very ordinary material which is used only by the people who are there in the rural areas, which was used. So all the villages which we have now, all our walls is not all the walls in the villages are not going to be 9 inches thick like how we have in the city, like how we have in the houses here. Those walls in the villages were more than 1 feet or 1.5 feet thick, because they held a lot of mud mortar and clay brickwork, things like that. So that is why they become more thicker. Now this is how clay is prepared. So clay is actually preparation of clay. The mud is taken out, and mud is actually with human force. Mud is actually mixed with a little bit of clay and water. So when you look at in the pictures, which is down mixing with hand, so people can mix with hand. I think this is very understandable, because all of you had attended the mud workshop which happened in RAC college. I can see all of you doing the same procedure in the photographs, so it's not that tough to understand. So mixing with hand is one thing. Ramming the earth. So in the middle picture there is this person who's ramming the earth. So ramming the earth is basically with some with a instrument like this, we ram the earth and make it flat. Third one is homogeneous mixture clay mortar. So homogeneous mixture clay mortar is a different type which we use it to mix. Now this is the mud wall. This is the usual mud wall which we have seen in different villages and different parts of our region in India. These mud walls are actually very good for hot climates, because they don't allow the heat to come in. They actually keep the inner temperature compact. As you can see, there are cavities in this mud block. So these cavities also hold the heat, and they can actually hold the heat, and they won't let it inside, so the inner temperature of the room is always kept cool. Now the applications of the mud mortar. So applications of the mud mortar, if we see, first one is the walls. So in the walls we are using mud mortar to build houses. Now in the first picture, if we see, it is basically people who are building it in the rural areas of Africa, or the rural areas have building constructions like this. So mud being plastered to own framework. So if you can see in the middle picture, the framework is actually done with bamboo. The middle picture and this picture, the second and the third. So when we use bamboo there, and then after that we put a little bit of mesh or a chicken mesh on top of that, and we take mud and keep plastering it until it dries up. On the down we can see mud wall and mud plaster. So if you can see here, this woman is doing a mud wall, and after which she actually decorates the mud plaster in this type of ornamentation or decoration type. And then if you are doing it in buildings, it becomes so easy, and the buildings will have a good texture and a good finish with the mud wall, if you are doing it with good skilled labor. Wall with mud blocks. So mud blocks, when they are made, walls can be built. And mud is also used as a binding material for the mud walls itself. Now if you see here, brick mud is used as a binding material. This one is stone mud is used as a binding material. This is the whole wall. Now different advantages and uses are there for different things. So this is how mud and clay blocks are actually molded or used. So mud and clay box, so how this is the mold which they have in the left hand side. This is being done everywhere in every part of India. Even here in Coimbatore, when we go towards this Tadagam road and beyond that, they are doing this. We had actually planned for a case study to visit there, but due to this corona and quarantine, we couldn't make that possible. So this is how they make it, basically molding. These are the structures, a few structures which are there in the northern India and in southern India, which are made use of building with bricks and mud wall. Now these are usual structures which we see in around our villages, the hill stations, those tribal villages which we have. So if you can see here, the tribal villages have actually done a little bit of ornamentation to the mud wall. So which is actually beautiful. This is the usual, mud wall and attached roof image, and this one is the image of another circular plan of the same mud wall and attached roof. So cement we are not going to look at. We are going to look at the next chapter, which is going to be mud continuing. So we are going to look at a little bit of detail of the history of the soil as a binding material. So earth as a binding material. So earth was actually soil is otherwise called as earth. So the previously in the late in the very old stages, earth was the only building material which was abundant. We were not able to get any cement. We were not able to make any bricks and things like that. So with earth, what can we make? With earth, we can make bricks. With earth, we can make binding mortar. With earth, we can make plastering, and with earth, we can make roofs also. So this is how this particular binding material, mud, started. So they are used for different purposes and used in different ways. So there are different techniques of sticking it together and making it into a wall. This varied considerably, even sometimes in a matter of few miles from district another. So this Laurie Baker is one of the architects who very aptly used this particular method. He had used it for all the hot and humid regions of India. Now, earth and soil. So, mud as a construction material has been extensively used since the Neolithic times. Yes, we would have learned in history. Mud construction is mainly found in places which are relatively dry and have mud in abundance. So, relatively dry areas are actually literally meaning to that they are hot or heated up areas. So, hot and dry climate or the humid climate where mud is abundant. So, mud is used as a thermal conductive material for the walls itself. Now let's skip this slide. Now let's come to the soil source. So mud required for the building can be taken from the plot itself, which is very sustainable. The soil is collected after the depth of 60 centimeters only, because the topsoil is not, will contain a lot of impurities. So we go down to a depth of at least 2 feet, and then we take the mud from there. As the top layer is full of organic matter, it isn't used. Below it is sand and clay which are dug out in heaps. So we can't use the hard rock, so we eliminate the hard rock and we take only the mud and the clay which is available below 2 feet or 3 feet below. Now this one is the soil types. The soil types are of different types. So these are different types of mud also. It can vary. So the soil will have gravel, sand, silt, clay, and organic soil. So mainly organic soil, mainly composed of rotting, decomposing organic matter such as leaves, plants, vegetable matter, is spongy when wet. Usually smells of decaying matter. It's dark in color and usually damp. So these are the 5 different types which we should know just for the learning sake. Soil usability. Now when we look into the first one, how is soil used? Gravel. Gravel alone is no use for mud wall building. The tiny lumps of stone have nothing to bind them together. So gravel is not a good thing. Sand is no use of the wall. It is mixed with clay. So sand is used in the mixture. Silt. No, not good for building walls. It will hold together, but it's very strong, not very strong. So that is the disadvantage of silt. Clay. Drying out when often shrink. So clay as it dries, it will shrink off. Now there are different tests for soil and mud. So there are different field tests like the color test, touch and smell test, biscuit test, hand wash test, cigar test, adhesion test, and lab tests also. So field test we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and lab test we have like 2 lab tests. So the color test procedure: observe the color of the soil. So deep yellow, orange, and red. So when you observe the color of the soil and you interpret that with a particular use, it is called as the color test. The touch and smell. The touch and smell procedure is you rub a small quantity of dry soil on the palm to feel its texture. Moisten the soil and rub again. So you open your palm in the hand, and then you put a little bit of this dry soil on top of that, and you rub the sand on the palm and you test it. That is called the touch and smell. You can see this slide for more details. Biscuit test procedure: make a smooth paste from the soil, removing all the gravel. So we make it like biscuits, 3 centimeter in diameter and 1 centimeter height. Leave it to dry and observe for shrinkages and cracks. It's a very simple thing. So basically, like how biscuits are made. So the composition is done, and the biscuits are laid out into molds, and they are then laid out into a little bit of heat. So when it comes to heat, we will know whether it breaks or it doesn't break. So that is how this test is being procedured. Biscuit test. Hand wash test procedure: play with wet soil till your hand gets thoroughly dirty. Wash your hands to see how difficult is it to clean. So basically, this we've done in our childhood. We basically put our hand into this mud, and then we come and try to wash it. Some mud goes off easily, some mud doesn't go off easily. It'll have a good contact with water and it'll be very strong. So that is called hand wash test. Cigar test: make a smooth paste from soil, removing all the gravels. Roll into a palm and make a cigar. Slowly push it outside. Now, this test has not been done in our regional things. The other tests have been done. Adhesion test: make a ball out of wet soil, pierce a knife into it. So, you make a ball out of wet soil, then you pierce a knife into it, and then you test out how strong that structure is or how weak the structure is. So, that is how adhesion test works out to be. Sieve test. Now this is the lab test, sieve and sedimentation test. Sieve test is procedure: pass soil on a series of standard sieves set on top of another. Observe the soil collected in each sieve. So the sieve test will actually put us through a little bit of doing it in the lab. Sedimentation test: take a transparent cylindrical bottle of jar, fill it with 1/4 of soil and 3/4 of water, shake well and allow it to settle. So the amount of settling sediment, we can understand how strong the soil is. Now these are the different types of tests which we look at in for soil. Now we have these different types of techniques with which the earth is built. This is the cob wall technique, which we'll see. This is easy to understand from the thing. These are the things which we are going to do in sheets if we can continue with our regular classes in college. Rammed earth, which we saw in the last thing, rammed earth with bamboo, and then adobe, which is basically molds, and it is natural building material also. Though if you read this, you can understand the adobe building material. Compressed earth block, which is very abundant and which is being used in construction nowadays. Wattle and daub is one of the previous methods which you would have come across in history about how they built it. So foundations solve next. So mortar we've already seen about. So you can see until the earth bag construction in this particular PPT. Earth bag construction is nothing but the oven bags are filled with inorganic material. Let's say even soil. So when they're filled with soil and they are put it into a particular plan like this, a circular plan, they are done in windows, sills, and doors. This is how the whole structure will come out to be. So it's going to be a heavy construction, and this construction will be of good thermal capacity in hot and dry climates also. So until here you can see in this particular PPT, which is composed of mud, which will be sent to you, and you can write the assignments from this PPT also.